Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first class in the what is known as Se présenter en anglais. And this, even though the title of this class is given in French, what we're going to do is really about the specificity of English as far as when you talk and when you write. You want to not only use sort of correct English grammar, but you also want to do things, say things, and write things in a way that is sort of more in keeping with cultural norms, that is sort of more spontaneous or more natural for an English speaker, right? So there is a cultural aspect to this class, right? So as I've just said, there are going to be two basic, it's about writing and it's about speaking. So that means from the outset, you will be asked to do, you are going to hand in four small assignments, two short writing assignments, right? One of which I am going to discuss today, and two short speaking assignments. And for those, you will record yourself using, let's say, your phones or your computers, as I am doing now. I'm not a computer wizard, but I'm capable of using QuickTime Player, which is the basic application on my computer to make recordings. So you will be asked to record yourself talking, usually presenting yourself. I will give more details on that, but that's the basic gist of this class. It's sort of writing and speaking in a way that's kind of natural for English speakers, right? And make you sort of perhaps more aware of certain of those aspects. Okay. So next week I will be talking more about oral aspects, right? But this week I'm going to start with written ones. And to do so, I'm going to use, you will have noticed that in the collective mail that you have received, there are two Word documents, right? The one I will be, there is one with basic grammar guidelines. Now, both of these Word documents have been created by Mrs. Bat, and I have actually taken over this class from her, so I've decided to use a lot of the work that she's done to prepare this class. She has more experience giving it, and I really like her way of doing it and the way she presents these things. So I've decided to sort of follow her in that respect. So this one of these documents is the one that is called Writing Summaries and Papers, right? Talks about how to write a summary, right? And so for next week, I'm going to ask you to do a critical summary, right? And of course, a critical summary involves, you could do a critical summary of anything, but what this will be about will be a critical summary of an essay. And that is also why you will find as attached documents, links or two PDF files, two essays. You can choose the one you would prefer to do. You can either, it depends, I would say you can, so I will let you sort of peruse them. The T.S. Eliot essay is, I would say it's sort of it's about classic, what is a classic in literature, and it's I would say obviously it's more literary. It's written in, I think it's the 20s, 1920, whereas the Adrian Rich essay, Adrian Rich is a poet, American poet. This is more about the question of women in society. So you can choose. You might want to choose the one that sort of interests you. You might want to choose the one that is about an area that you are sort of less familiar with. That's up to you. But I will ask each of you to write a resume of either of these texts, and that won't be for next week, but that you can hand that in 2 weeks. It might be a good idea to start it. That way, if you have questions, you can write me back and ask questions about how you should go about doing this. But that is the gist of what you're going to do. So if you read, it might be a good idea for you to read this document, writing summaries and papers. You can pause this video and read the document, because once you will have done that, you will have noticed that there are, Mrs. Bad has talked about two different kinds of summaries, right? She's talked about a sort of an objective summary and a critical summary, right? So we're not really going to go about doing an objective summary. I think it's more interesting to develop ways for you to talk about writers' points of view, what their opinions are, and how they develop their arguments, right? As opposed to just summarizing facts. But it's a difficult thing. It's actually a difficult thing to do, and it's a very important thing to do. To be able to say, yes, I read this essay. It was written by such and such a person. It's about such and such a thing. And this is the author's opinion on this thing. And how does the author go about, presenting their arguments? So that I've sort of just gave a summary of what you will find in this document. You will find this on page 2. Okay, and I like the way that this is broken down. We have this idea that in your summary you are going to have that sort of opening sentence, right, where you are going to, basically give the factual information about here. Well, I'm writing about this essay or this. In our example, it will be an essay, but it could obviously be a novel. It could be anything, right? So you're going to say, I'm writing about this essay written by this author that was published in such and such a date, right? And then you're going to, that's just basically the factual information about what you're writing about. But then immediately, right, and this can be integrated into that first sentence or given as a second sentence. But the idea is that you should do it right away. Is you have to be able to say what the general topic of the essay is. Is this essay about, we could say, inflation? Is this essay about the environment? Is this essay about history, right? So it's important to be able to discern, I would say, the main thrust, right? The main point that the subject that the author is talking about. So you will be asked to state that from the outset. Once you have stated the facts, have labeled the text, you'll be asked to state that from the outset. Then you will go on to, then once you've done that, notice that right away you're getting more interpretive. I'm on page 2 here. I'm looking at this part where we have the next part. Once you've talked about the topic, you're going to talk about the thesis, right? So this means you have to, when you're reading, you should keep this in mind, ask yourself, what is the, I would say, in a sense, en français, on dirait la problématique, or you could say, what is the main argument that the author advances? That another way to think about this is sort of the opinion. There's perhaps the opinion that the author wants to argue. For example, if we are talking about the environment, the topic is the environment. Might be the environment. In the opinion, obviously, in most cases, will very likely be the opinion of the author would be that we should start listening to science as opposed to politicians, something like that, right? So notice that would be the distinction between the topic and the thesis, right? That it's very the thesis is oriented. It will be the author usually wanting to take the reader or the readers in a certain direction, right? And which means that they're going to be usually there's going to be something rhetorical about this. They're going to want to be convincing the readers of something, right? So, and you have to keep that in mind, that the author is trying to convince the readers of something. And what you want to do is the next part, which is listed as organization, is to say, well, how is this achieved, right? You say, yes, this is what the author wants to achieve as a thesis. They want to convince us that we should listen to scientists as opposed to politicians about the environment. And then you ask yourself, well, how does the author actually bring this about? Right? And that is when you will more closely follow the lines of the argument. And here, of course, you will need to select what is most relevant, right? You are not supposed to give everything. Obviously, it would not be a summary. You are not supposed to give everything that the author talks about. You're supposed to really think about, what are the main points or that the author makes to put forth their argument, right? And that might be a little bit difficult, right? So notice here we're looking a little bit more, you're being, once again, more interpretive. You're asking yourself about the technique. The author brings up this point to, achieve this end, right? And then usually the idea is, let's say we have a main point. For our example is a essay about the environment, and then there will be sort of sub-arguments, right? There will be, the main point is that, let's say, we should listen to scientists. Maybe a sub-argument of that would be that science is the most reliable source of information we have today, right? And then you might say, yes, I see in the beginning of this essay, the author has been at pains to really prove, first of all, right, that's sort of the first building block of the argument of the author, that yes, science is the most reliable thing we have today, right? So it will be up to you to try to discern, and there are more than one ways to, and there is some interpretation here, to discern where or what the sort of sub-arguments are. And the thing that is important to do is, I think, is to keep this in mind before you read these essays. And it's a wonderful tool because it'll make you a better reader, right? It's very useful to sort of, you can go through with a notebook and say, you could maybe ask yourself, sometimes it's not obvious, is this, a sub-argument here? Is this or is this where we go from the first sub-argument to the second sub-argument, right? So take some time to really, the good thing about this exercise is it's actually a very good reading exercise, really. And it's also a way for you to sort of establish a sort of a hierarchy and sort of really be aware of, what the author is trying to do. That is more or less what all you're really going to need to do. Once you present, the sort of the organization, you're going to go through and list the sub arguments. Eventually, it might be a good idea to indicate how the author moves from one sub argument to another, right? And then finally, you can sort of, this is this is once again, I would say, the most interpretive thing, or almost the most personal aspect. You can perhaps sort of open up your remarks to as far as, for example, the validity of this is sort of in a sense your opinion, where your opinion becomes more manifest. Try to ask or answer questions as to the validity of the argument, sort of the relevance of the argument, the weight of the argument. You're sort of in a sense, we could say it's a sort of a global evaluation. So and it's important to hold off on those. I would say that it's sort of a judgment, right? I would say it's your judgment will be much more convincing, right, if you hold your fire until the end, right? If you are able to fully account for the thesis of the author, the main argument and the sub-arguments of the author, and then at the end you will give your opinion on it. It's as if you've listened to someone, you've listened to them make your point, and then you have chimed in at the end, but you haven't interrupted. In a sense, you shouldn't really interrupt the author who you're summarizing. You should let the author fully, try to be as transparent as you can in presenting their arguments, and then you can react to that, right? That's the main advice would be to hold off on that. And it's important to know that this exercise, right? This is going to be, if this is extremely useful, let's say if you're going to go and write a master's, you're going to obviously be citing lots of authors, and it's extremely useful to be able to develop this habit, this method of obviously it'll be a little bit different. You're going to be talking about something in a book, for example, or in a given article that is relevant to your point, but it's extremely valuable, and it's necessary to be able to succinctly underscore what the main point made by the writer is, how they made it, and then you interpret it at the end, right? So think of this as being sort of a sort of an exercise that you are going to be able to duplicate in a lot of different settings, right? So we'll leave it at that. I will once again ask you to read the two documents. Read also, no, you don't have, it's up to you if you want to read both essays. You might want to read both to decide. I will ask you to read both essays and then start. I would suggest that you actually start trying to do the summary. It's not as easy as you might think. It does, as I said, I think it really involves decisions that you make when you're reading, right? You have to be very attentive. But it is definitely a valuable exercise. So, as I said, I will only ask you to hand this in 2 weeks, but it would be a very good idea for you perhaps to work on it. You can hand in a rough draft next week. That's not an assignment, but it's an option. If you would like to hand in a rough draft next week, I will give you advice on that so that you can polish it up to hand in your final draft of this first assignment in 2 weeks. So I wish you the best of luck. I hope you are doing well, in good health, and that you manage to enjoy this confinement to the best of your abilities. And we will be keeping in touch every week. Yeah, you will be receiving. We will be in communication every week. I'll be sending you usually a collective email. I feel as if that seems to be the most effective way for us to keep in touch. Okay, take care. Bye.